wasn't sure like if that was the right fit for me. I thought maybe I should be a therapist. I actually applied and got accepted to a few programs to become an addiction counselor. But I eventually decided like I'm still paying for my first master's, like paying for another one, probably, but really it was from Podcast Movement. And the first time I went there in LA, I met someone from Spotify and she was like, you need to build this. Like, you are in the perfect position to build this. No one else is doing it. And it gave me the idea, like, I could build a podcasting sober business and not a sober business like most other people have, because it just didn't feel right. But in my old job, there was like a lot of criticism of me and some very hurtful comments. So I was trying to leave anyways, but I had very low self-esteem from that. And I didn't believe that I could build a network. So when Spotify told me like, you should do this, I was like, no, like I'm a loser, I'm just some loser. Like I can't even be successful anywhere. So how could I build an entire business? And I ghosted her. And I didn't follow up, and I let the opportunity fade away. And then I went to another conference a couple months later, and I met someone else who sells my ads now. He helps me get sponsors, and he told me the same thing. He's like, you got to build this. This is the best idea. I know that person you spoke to. She's amazing. So I came home. I quit my job. And I wrote her and I said, like, let's go. I'm ready. And then I did it. And then I asked my friends to join and asked some podcasters that I really admired. And like, they said yes, which was shocking. I didn't think anyone would want to join. But now I actually got another podcast too. So now I have 5 shows in the network.
Oh, wow.
My own.
Okay.
So it's becoming really big. And I have 2 more that I'm going to talk to. So hopefully we get them too.
That's amazing. That is incredible. I love how, at first you had that, I would say it's kind of a mentality that we have that's carried over from when we drank that, oh, I can't do that. I'm nobody. Like, I'm just a normal person. That's it. But really, the creativity to think about how can I do this other than coaching or writing books or, having a program. That's incredible. And the fact that you're seeing the rewards right now, like, it's scary, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that you can't do it. It's just new things are scary. And that is so awesome. So what would you say, like, was the moment that you realized I want to make this sober rather than just make it a podcast network?
I think when I was talking to the person from Spotify, she said, if you make it a sober network, no one has done that ever. And it's expanding a little bit. So it's not just podcasts about addiction, but it's also including podcasts that are either by sober hosts who talk about other topics as well, or shows that are by, mostly sober hosts that kind of support addiction or support trauma. So I'm kind of branching out a little bit into all topics that impact addiction. But I just thought, like, no one's helping the sober community. Like, we're all just indie podcasters. Like, we don't know what we're doing. We're trying to monetize and horribly undercharging sponsors and giving them basically free marketing. I see my friends on Instagram doing reels for brands for like basically free or in exchange for free product. And I don't want us to be taken advantage of anymore. And I want us to be like represented. So now I'm the representative for my shows and they don't even have to worry about how much to charge or am I undercharging. Like, I just handle that for you. You just do what you've been doing this whole time. Give me that stress, because there's a lot of stress. Give me that stress, and I'll handle it. And, now it supports them, because when I started working with my podcasters and bringing in new shows, they didn't even understand the potential for how much they could make from their loyal audience. And we're not like getting money, like you have to pay to listen to the show. If you listen to the ad on the podcast, we make a little bit of money. And every time someone does that, the podcaster makes a little bit more money, and that's it. And it keeps all the content free. It prevents podcasters from burning out because they're worrying about their bills, or like maybe they have to go get another job or something. So I just wanted to take care of sober people who are just trying to do good for the community.
I love how that is, because that goes back to the giving back, right? But there's so many different ways we can give back. I actually told Jonathan Jones down at Podcast Movement, like when we think of creativity, we tend to also take creativity and put it in a box where it's like a painter, an artist, like something like that, that's creative. But really it's taking different forms of thinking from one aspect of life and being able to put it into another aspect. So like being able to take a podcast network and be like, or giving back, usually that's like a one-on-one thing, but really you're taking it and putting it on a community, putting it on, podcasts where that people need help. Like, how do you monetize? How do you run a show? Like, I mean, I'm 120 episodes in and I'm still learning how to run a show. Like that's the thing, but you just try to get better every single time. It's just like sobriety, just like mental health. Try to get better every day, because that's all you can do is take it day, and eventually you can look a week out, eventually you can look a month out, eventually you can look further out. But where are you at right now? The creativity that comes from it, like I love it so much, and I just I want to give you flowers, because that's so it's very smart, and it's something that, like you said, nobody's doing. Like, and as you also said, which I've talked about before too, like branching out to other topics, not just focusing on sobriety, because it's funny. Sobriety is one aspect, but we are made up of a lot of different interests. Just because you're sober doesn't mean that you no longer like sports, you no longer like video games, you no longer like everything. You just happen to be sober while doing it. That's it. So that's wonderful. I love how you're doing that. When you told, let's say, people that you would hope would be your biggest cheerleaders, what was their response when you said that you're going to leave your career and create a new one?
My husband was all for it, because he's just always supportive of me no matter what. Like, even when I was drinking and making our life completely miserable, he was so nice to me the whole time. Like, he always took good care of me. So I think he felt fear. Like, is this actually going to work? And the fear that I had, that I think he also felt, is now I have a career gap in my resume. Like, I have a business, I have a job, but if I want to do biotech again and work in research, now I have a gap and I'm not like relevant to that career anymore. And I would have to explain like all the sober stuff that I'm doing. So it makes it a lot more public. Like, a lot of coworkers and old bosses have been like looking at my LinkedIn and like looking at all my stuff and being nosy. And I think he just felt that fear for me. But everyone else I told was so into it. My boss at my old job, he was so into it. Like, the whole time, he was actually a mentor who eventually transitioned into my boss. So we were kind of friendly too. But he knew about the show, and he was like, we're going to lose you. Like, you're taking over the world. And I told him, and he was just genuinely happy. I think more it was like fear. Can this actually last forever? And if it doesn't, will you be able to get a traditional full-time job, or will it be really hard for you? Because there is still a lot of stigma. Like, a lot of people that I used to work with probably found out and they were like, oh my God, I didn't know Jill was an alcoholic. Like, let me go look at all of her stuff and like see how she destroyed her life. So there's a lot of stigma and people still don't really understand. So I think it was mostly that.
What was I seeking in there, right? Well, if I dig down into it, what I was seeking is comfort. And I just wanted to be able to live my life and be proud of myself, accept myself, be excited for what I have going on. I did not want to be in a place where I felt like I had to make these major changes. I just wanted to live. But I didn't realize that I was waiting for life to come to me. When I decided to go sober, I knew that I had to make a change to not feel these gross feelings that I had for years. I knew that I had to make a change if I wanted my life to take a step to where I wanted it to. But I was unwilling in my life, post-alcohol, to do that same thing. 3 years ago, I'm driving into work an hour each way, and I'm like, is this it? Is this all life is? Am I going to be going to work, coming home, feeding kids, going to bed, not having fun, asking how I need to have fun, have a smile, do something where I'm out of my own head because I was trapped. I was on autopilot. I wasn't really there. I was looking for something different, and I didn't know what different was. If you'd asked me what I was feeling, you'd have gotten, I don't know. Really, it was confusion around feelings, around wants, needs. I couldn't name what my needs were, what my wants were. I should have everything that I wanted, but I didn't. And so that led me to, okay, I need to make changes. What are those changes going to look like? Well, I can't name my emotions. I should probably start to feel those emotions so that I can figure out what's going on. But that was not a one-to-one fix. It was uncomfortable, right? There's that saying that in the discomfort is where the growth is. But you have to understand why it's uncomfortable, why there's discomfort if there's going to be growth. If you don't have the words, you're not going to be able to just sit there and accept it and come up with what is the growth action. You're just going to be uncomfortable, and that's going to make you go back into the comfort shell. And really, that's what I want this episode to be about, is the discomfort, getting uncomfortable, putting yourself out there to learn something new, to do something, to make a change. And what does that look like? And for me, it looked like putting myself out there, being open to being wrong, and finding different perspectives on life, finding different perspectives on mental health. It started with ADHD diagnosis. Like, okay, I've had ADHD, kind of known as, been a running joke. What is next? Well, it's learning what that actually is, how your brain works, and then kind of looking at your life and trying to figure out if this actually is something that I want in my life, or is this something that somebody told me I should want in my life, and so I'm keeping that. Is this something that I actually enjoy, or am I staying because I'm good at it? Or am I staying because I feel trapped, like I feel like I have to, like this is what I should want? What are my dreams, and what dreams am I carrying with me from what people have told me I should want? Have people told me that I'm dramatic and I'm blow things out of proportion? Yeah, often. And so, that leads you to not accept your emotions as your own. So trying to define what this discomfort really is, what this being uncomfortable really feels like. And when it's there and you're confused, what is it that you are confused about? One of the greatest teachers in my life is my children, who are 5 and 3. And they show me what I don't necessarily want to see about myself. They show me how I can communicate better. They show me the behaviors where I'm like, I am showing them this behavior and I don't want them to have that. So how can I change it? So instead of having this idea that I know better and I don't show you that, and so I'm not going to look at it, we're just going to say as I, do as I say, don't do as I do. No, I want to look at that and transform it.
Amazing. 3 years later, I was almost 16 years old. I was 5'4", 102 pounds. I was using a phone book to see over the steering wheel. And I was losing to all these players I used to beat when I was 12. And it was a really challenging time for me as a teenager. And it could have gone one of two ways. It was a defining moment. Do I stop playing tennis and kind of give it up because I used to be good and now I'm not, and go hang out with my buddies and maybe even start drinking or partying? Or do I double down? Well, I doubled down and I got a lot better and I started growing, and it took me to Stanford. And I played for my dream school, for my dream coach, the greatest college tennis coach of all time, Dick Gould. He won 17 national titles. He is the John Wooden of college tennis. And I had a transformation there. After my freshman year, I had this terrible serve. And instead of continuing to play pro tennis that summer in between my freshman and sophomore year, I went home to Denver, and I had an accidental transformation where I added 20 miles an hour to my serve. And now I had this big serve weapon. I physically grew, and I go back to Stanford. My coach's jaw dropped, and he couldn't believe I had transformed my body and my serve. And all of a sudden, I was at the top of the Stanford lineup, winning national championships. I was elected team captain and had this really remarkable, almost accidental career at Stanford. And that allowed me to play pro tennis. The dream was never to play pro tennis. I came from Colorado. It's a ski state, not a tennis state. And so I tried my hand at pro tennis. And in that first year on the tour, I shot up the world tennis rankings, which included playing that match with Chang. And then ultimately the injuries started to hit. And so I came to that crossroads when I was 25 years old, on what happens next when my body's falling apart and I'm feeling anxious and depressed and don't really know what's going to come about next in my career.
I really think that that mindset, right, where you're really looking at what am I going to do next? Where am I going now? That is exactly what happens when you're contemplating your relationship with alcohol, right? Or even your relationship with anything that you're using to escape your life, whether it's gambling, whether it's porn, video games. There's so many things that we do work too. So how difficult was it for you to shift gears and find a new passion with your body breaking down and trying to figure out where you fit into your life?
Sure. So, I always look at these defining moments. The defining moment when I was 15, almost 16 years old and my ranking had dropped. The defining moment when I went home to work on my serve instead of continuing to play pro tennis that summer and then transforming it. And then the defining moment at 25 years old when my body's breaking down and I'm having surgeries. And that was a time in my life that was really interesting around alcohol. And I know we're going to get to the deeper story around addiction shortly here, but I went on this period of about 2 years where I'd go 3 months where I'd go out to the bars with my friends and I'd party because I was hurt. And, what do you do when you're hurt and you're not playing pro tennis? One of the things you can do is party. And I wouldn't say it was an alcohol problem. It was more of a distraction, and it was a way of knowing now, a way of just letting off steam and meeting girls and being young and dumb and full of what. And And so I'd go like 3 months. And then after the 3 months, I'd be like, what am I doing? And then I'd go 3 months where I would hermitize. I would not hang out with anyone. I would drink. I was training, rehabbing like crazy. And then I'd get bored with that. And then I'd go back to that cycle again. And that went on for about a year and a half as I was rehabbing, trying to figure out my body. But during that time, I made a decision. I became obsessed with all things high performance, which I didn't know at the time. At 24 years old, I didn't know that 25 years later, I'm 49 now as we're recording this podcast. I didn't know that my life's work was going to be based around that decision to become obsessed with performance. I went to my first yoga class. I started eating organic food and drinking green drinks before it was considered cool. I worked with the top experts in the fields of nutrition, mindset, spirituality, injury prevention, biomechanics. I was a absolute sponge. And I took that information and I applied it to break the top 100 in the world for the first time at the age of 30. So I came back better and stronger because of my studies and my application. I made a lot of mistakes along the way. We don't have enough time to go into all those. But I had this really interesting career where I was playing better in my 30s than I was in my 20s. And I was really committed to the process of performance. And so alcohol didn't really factor into my life after kind of that little binge period when I was down and out. But I studied a lot of stuff in the mindset world, emotional regulation, emotional intelligence, belief systems. And it set the stage for when I was 34 years old, I'd been playing on the tour for 11 years. I was burned out. I was stressed out. I was really questioning my calling and my purpose. I'd been playing this tennis game for so long, but I wasn't getting the results I want. I was feeling lonely on the tour. And at that moment, I was visiting my family in Florida. I have two families, Colorado, Florida family, and my father, my stepmother, and my three siblings. And I remember walking into my brother's bedroom one morning, or that morning. It was December 30th, 2007. And lying on the floor, sprawled out, passed out, a white foamy substance coming out of his mouth. My brother Eric was overtaken by a cocktail of drugs. And in that moment, my professional career ended. In that moment, I decided my calling is to be a coach and a mentor and to help others. And it happened to be in that moment, it was my brother. So got him to the hospital and just became committed to his recovery. Now, of course, there was probably some enabling there, like, does he really want to do it or not? But I felt he was 17 years old. I was 34. He needed a figure in his life to help him if he wanted to help. So we got into rehab, and I abruptly quit pro tennis, retired from the tour because of my brother, more than willing to do it. It was a brother's love kind of episode. And I moved back to Denver and I started coaching tennis. And I realized within the first month of coaching that I loved coaching more than I loved playing Michael Chang at the US Open. There was a thrill that I got out of seeing other people get wins, other people succeed, than for me just to win a tennis match. And so that began my career in coaching in tennis. And then I built an online tennis platform that's helped millions of people around the world. If you're a tennis player, you can go check out Tennis Evolution. We have a big following on YouTube. And I've been just helping people learn the fundamentals of the game. And so that really began my professional career in coaching. And then the last 6 years, I've been working on. I've been a performance coach and a speaker the last year, really sharing my message with the world. And it's around performance. It's around decreasing stress. It's around improving your mental health. It's around tapping into your heart. And of course, my brother's story is a very powerful story that, of course, I know we're going to be talking about.
It was, I felt a ton of shame, not just that night, but in years to come, for what I had put my family through. They didn't ask. Like, I called the next morning. I left my cell at like 8:30 in the morning. We get an hour out of the cell in the morning and an hour out of the cell in the evening. So that was my time to call my family. And I called my mom and she answered. And like, she was just so devastated. Like, first of all, they had no idea of how extensive my drinking problem was. They knew I drank. They had no idea I relied on it as heavily as I did because I was working and I was going to school and paying my bills. And so outwardly, everything looked to be intact, right? There was no real reason for concern. So she was shocked and she was just devastated because she thought I was doing so well. And so I'm trying to explain to her. I mean, I couldn't really explain what had happened. I just kept apologizing, like, Mom, I'm so sorry. Like, I don't know what happened, Mom. I don't know what happened. And I asked to talk to my dad. And she said, Martin, I haven't been able to talk to him all night and all morning. Like, he won't even come out of the room. Like, he is so broken over this. You know, my dad is not a man who would express many words of, emotion. He kind of grew up in that, kind of tough guy era.
Yeah.
Showed his love. He took care of the family. He spent quality time with his kids, but he wasn't going to be that emotional guy. He did not want to talk to me. He wasn't angry at me. If anything, and this was misguided and wrong as well, but he blamed my brother. He blamed my friend for allowing me to drive. Right? He said, friends don't let friends drive drunk. I don't know why they would let you drive. And by that time, I'd already started to take full responsibility. I said, Dad, you can't blame them. You can't, like, I made the decision, it's nobody's fault but mine. But he was just crushed, man, because like he knew that like I had so much promise, right? I was the one who was going to be the first one to graduate from college, in my family, right? And I was going to, be successful in all these things. And then he just saw that whole dream just went away. And, so little would we know, so I ended up losing Mom 3 years into my 17.5-year sentence. I lost my mom and I was not able to attend the funeral. So when you're convicted and you're in a state prison in the state of Oregon, you're not allowed to attend the funeral because there's too many people there and they see it as a high risk. Somebody could try to snatch you or, hold guns to the officers. So you're not allowed to go to the funeral. I was able to petition the administration, however, to go to the funeral home. So I'm driven, my family paid like $700 to have me driven, 200 miles, cause they send you way out to a prison in a, rural area far away from your family, right? Your family has to take off work and spend the whole day and get a hotel to come and visit you. That's a whole nother story about the prison industrial complex and the gouging fees that they charge you to have phone calls and all that. But anyway, so they transferred me to Portland. I go through the funeral home. The only person who's allowed to be there is the funeral director. The officers told me on the way there, and they told my family, if anybody is in there or hanging out in the car on the street, we're going to keep going. He's not going to go in that funeral home. Yes, they were very adamant about that. In fact, one of them, so you go shackled, right? You're shackled at the ankles. You're shackled. You have a belly chain going around. You're handcuffed in front of you. You're wearing a white jumpsuit. And they go in and sweep the place before you go in and make sure nobody's hanging out in the bathroom, with a machine gun or whatever is what they say. So they take me in. And it's just a dark, they take me into the area where my mom is at the front of the room, in her casket. She's all dressed up and, looking nice. And they go to the back of the room and they allow me to go up there, in shackles. They don't take any of the constraints off. And it's just me and my mom and two officers in a dimly lit room. For me to say my final goodbye. And, I'm grateful, and I would do that exact same thing 13 months later when my dad passed away very unexpectedly. So I'm grateful for having had the opportunity to say my final goodbye to both of my parents. But I'm telling you, the coldness and just the isolation of that feeling, to be doing that by myself, no family, no friends, no hugs, no condolences, nothing. Like, you don't think about any of that when you like when this happened,
Yeah.
obviously I knew life would be drastically different when I got out, but there's no way you can possibly think about, all these ripple effects and the ways that this is going to affect you and your family when you make that one catastrophic mistake. There's no way you can calculate how far reaching this is going to be, but I would soon find out.
I come from Wisconsin. I grew up in Wisconsin my entire life, and I grew up in a small town. And I know personally, God, 10, 15, 20 people who died drinking and driving. I know a lot of people that have been in accidents and sent away. And it still didn't deter me from making those mistakes. I mean, I drove hours and I woke up and I had no idea how I got there. And it's like these decisions that we make when we're drinking, and you have to set it up beforehand, the habit of Uber, of what's the taxi number, and knowing that that's what I'm going to do, or the walk, friends. I had to go to the police station and pick my brother up on a DUI, and thank God he didn't hit anybody, didn't get in an accident. I think he was passed out at a stoplight, is what it was, and then he got pulled over, and it was like, but a couple weeks before, driving in winter, he was driving drunk, and he spun out into a snowbank, and he called me somehow. I got there, pushed his car out, we parked it down the road where we'd be safe overnight, and I drove him home. And he successfully went a month calling me to come get him. I was sober at this point. And he still ended up getting driving drunk one night and getting a DUI. And it's like, these are decisions that are made before, like through habits, like I said. They really are. And the environment that we grow up in, even if we see the consequences on the outside, we don't think about them on the inside. We don't think about how it's going to impact our families, right? I mean, and you talking so vulnerably about this and how it affected your family and you and everything like that. It's important to get these. Like, I know that the most influential anti-drug message that I received in school was a mock of somebody dying in a car accident because of a drunk driver. And like that was they took a classmate and went through a funeral, and they showed his family picking out a casket, like, and him lying in the casket. Like, they went all out for this because Wisconsin has a massive drinking problem and a massive driving while drunk problem. And it was enough to deter me for a few months, but I still inevitably went back to that old habit, right? And just understanding there's so many victims when this happens. There's the people who are not going home to see their family anymore, right? There's the victims. There's the people who don't get to hug their family anymore. But there's also the person behind it. There's the person on the other side who are not going to be able to hug their families. That their life is for, no matter how much, there's just no taking it back. And the empathy, you are not a POS. You are not, right? But oftentimes when we hear about this, we're like, how can people make that decision? We know better. But we still do.
That was the interesting way around for me, is the fact that after all that, I'm like, you know what? I didn't love me at this weight. I thought I'll love myself when I get to here, and actually I didn't. Now what? And that was where the mental aspect of it. But one thing that did tie over was things like the dedication, was things like taking a habit that went from zero proficiency to very proficient, that has really tied over and allowed me to, along the way, apply the same mentality to things like self-acceptance. If I can't talk to myself nice on the first go, that makes sense, because I couldn't squat on the first go either. You say to someone, be kind to yourself, talk to yourself nicely, talk to yourself like you want someone else to, and they go, I can't. They've had 20, 30, 40 years of practice of talking to themselves like crap. And now, when they try and talk to themselves well for the first time, it doesn't feel natural. At least because of the journey I'd already been on at that point. When that happened, I was like, okay, this is a skill just like anything else. So I'm not good at it now, but I'm going to put the work in and I'm going to get good at it. And I'd like to say that I talk to myself pretty nice most of the time. I still have a brain that's got a bit of a demon in there. But most of the time, I do it now. But it wasn't easy at first. There's 7 questions you didn't answer all. You didn't ask all answered. I don't know where that came from.
That was it was amazing. There were like 4 different things that I want to touch on in there. But like the one where you ended, as somebody who is recently, like really like a year ago, like really started to focus on my self-loathing. Like I identified it, luckily through thinking about my kids and realizing how that has carried through my entire life, and knowing that my neutral is in reverse, like really far in reverse. So I need to get myself back to neutral, like self-love. Fuck that. Like I'm still not in a place where I can do that, right? Like, so I just want to get to being okay with myself. So instead of looking in the mirror and thinking, what a piece of shit, and like literally having a physical, like, pulling back, it was small. Most people probably couldn't see it, but I realized it. Just standing there and saying, you're okay, like was a good start. And now I can look in the mirror and I don't have to say you're okay. It is the first thing that comes to my mind is you're okay. But I'm not at like, boy, I love you, like things like that. But there are things like understanding my worth now where I didn't before. And you think you get to this goal mentally, physically, financially, career-wise that are going to make you feel like you deserved it. And it's just constantly, oh, I'm supposed to get that. Oh, there's nothing here. Oh, what's next? And you don't realize what that hole is inside of you. And it really is that self-acceptance that is easy to talk about. It's hard to get to, but you just got to figure out where your starting point is.
Yeah. I mean, what's harder than getting to self-acceptance is not getting to self-acceptance. You've got to just choose which version of hard you want. Like it's something I call slingshots and boomerangs. I would show you my slingshot and boomerang, but I packed them because I have to go and give a talk in person for the first time in a long time tomorrow. So, no, not tomorrow, Wednesday. So I packed them. Normally I have a slingshot and a boomerang right here. But the idea of a boomerang is all of our bad behaviors are what I call boomerangs. Bad behaviors or negative behaviors is then commonly reframed as. And the irony of all this is I came up with this theory whilst drunk in a pool in Mexico. Don't let that sway it. It's standing up still 5 years later. But the idea of the concept that behind every behavior is a positive intent. So like I've interviewed you. So behind that behavior, what was the positive intent? No, I'm joking. Obviously it was I want to talk to you. But I remember you talking about how for you in the early stages of your drinking, you were applauded by, was it your dad and his work colleague, the other people on the electrical lineman? Did I get it right?
Absolutely right. Nailed it.
I promise I haven't rewatched the episode just to kind of brush up on it. But back then, you were kind of seen as the young legend to these older guys, and that was really good for your self-esteem at the time. Or, well, it was a boomerang for your self-esteem at the time, right? Because it gave you that self-esteem in the short term, because that self-esteem was always just coming from other people's approval. Just like the alcohol helps you crave more alcohol, the approval helps you crave more approval, because you can't give yourself what the approval does yet. So, yeah, like, I don't know how I got onto this now. My brain's gone onto a little bit of a side note. But the point being is that these behaviors, I call them boomerangs, because they generally give you and take away the same thing. It's not always the same thing, but like, let's just look at the fact that I needed a coffee before I came on here. I needed a coffee before I came on here because I couldn't sleep very well last night because I was still playing chess until very early in the morning. And then I was still playing chess in my head when to stop playing chess because I'm obsessed. I have obsession cycles. As I say, the ADHD fits
Hyperfixation. I mean, we've all been there.
I will have forgotten that I
ADHD.
Yeah, I will have moved on to something completely different in 6 months. But right now it's chess, and I was double A doing that. And then in order to get a gym session in before the school run this morning, I had to be in the gym for 6 o'clock. So I was, up until like 1-ish, and then up again at 6 to go to the gym, and, pounded some caffeine to go and do that. And I tried, and then my plan was, because of all that, I thought I'm going to go the rest of the day without caffeine so I can sleep better tonight. But I was crashing half an hour ago, and I went had a cold shower because I thought that wakes me up without caffeine. It wasn't enough today. Now, here's the thing. I will reach that caffeine, and most people will reach for that caffeine to say, okay, I need some energy, right? And I'm using giant big bunny ears, air quotes, for energy. Caffeine doesn't give you energy. It gives you the illusion of energy.